Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty much all of us experience at some point, anxiety. It's a fundamental part of being human, but we're really going to focus on what happens when it, crosses that line and becomes an overwhelming disorder. And more importantly, we're going to look at how we can actively rewire the brain to fight back. Over the course of this explainer, we'll outline the main approaches to treating anxiety disorders, heavily focusing on psychological treatments like cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Basically, we're moving away from just pointing out the problem to equipping you with a practical, evidence-based toolkit. Let's get started.
Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today. First up, when anxiety becomes disordered. Then, the stepped care approach. After that, we're going inside cognitive behavioral therapy, followed by rewiring thoughts and beliefs, and finally, facing fears through exposure. All right, Section 1, when anxiety becomes disordered. To kick things off, we really have to acknowledge that anxiety is a completely normal and honestly, sometimes a highly helpful response. It's literally our built-in alarm system, getting us primed for a fight or flight scenario. But we need to figure out exactly when that alarm system essentially malfunctions. So that brings us to a really big question. When exactly does normal anxiety become a disorder? It's a question you've probably asked yourself at some point. I mean, everybody gets stressed out before a huge presentation or a major life event, right? So where exactly is that boundary between everyday worry and a clinical condition? Well, according to the ICD-11 clinical guidelines, there are a few key red flags. Basically, a disorder happens when the anxiety is just totally out of proportion to the actual situation, or it sticks around way after the stressor is gone, or maybe it just pops up for absolutely no reason at all. But the biggest one, it causes significant distress and really impairs your daily functioning. We're talking disrupting your personal life, your family, education, or your job. And hey, even if you are somehow managing to keep those plates spinning while highly anxious, the guidelines point out that you're only doing it through an exhausting amount of extra effort. The 4-part anxiety cycle brilliantly shows exactly how this overwhelming distress really takes hold. It's like a giant trap. You've got physical feelings, like a racing heart, which feeds straight into emotions like fear. That fear triggers thoughts like, I absolutely cannot cope with this, which then leads directly to behaviors, mainly avoidance. The crucial takeaway here is that this is a self-reinforcing loop. It literally feeds on itself. To actually treat an anxiety disorder, we have to intervene and become cycle breakers. Which brings us to Section 2, the stepped care approach. Now that we understand that self-reinforcing loop, how do healthcare professionals actually step in when things get out of hand? To do this, the medical field relies on a highly structured framework, basically borrowing a stepped care model that's used for treating depression. So let's walk through it. These interventions logically scale up based on just how severe the generalized anxiety disorder is. Step 1 is essentially identification, a bit of education, and active monitoring. If things don't improve there, we step it up to Step 2, low-intensity psychological interventions, like guided self-help. Now, Step 3 is where we introduce high-intensity psychological interventions, specifically therapies like CBT, sometimes combined with medication. And finally, Step 4 is reserved for the most complex, treatment-resistant cases that really require highly specialist care and crisis services. For our explainer today, we're going to zoom right in on Step 3 of that care model. So, Section 3, inside cognitive behavioral therapy. We're going to peek under the hood of this gold standard psychological treatment and see what makes it tick. So, what is CBT exactly? Put simply, it's a psychological intervention designed to help people change how they think, that's the cognitive part, and what they do, the behavioral part. What's absolutely brilliant about this approach is its laser focus on the here and now. Unlike some older forms of psychoanalysis that spend years digging into childhood trauma, CBT empowers you by focusing entirely on actionable, concrete changes you can make today in the present moment. Look at how thoughts, behavior, feelings, and physical reactions all directly intersect and influence one another. This right here is the absolute core assumption of CBT. It is not the situation itself that causes your distress, but the meanings and the beliefs that you attach to it. Because we can consciously access our cognitive processes, our thoughts, and our mental images, we inherently hold the power to change them. It's a real game changer. But hey, let's bust a myth right now. CBT is not some magical cure where you just passively absorb wisdom while sitting on a couch. Not at all. It is highly structured and short-term, usually only 5 to 20 sessions. It's a true collaboration. And yes, it heavily relies on homework, doing thought records, and running behavioral experiments in your everyday life. It takes a certain psychological mindset and a genuine willingness to lean in, because ultimately, the entire goal is to empower you to become your own therapist. Moving right along to Section 4, rewiring thoughts and beliefs. Now that we've got the framework down, let's pop open the cognitive side of our toolkit and see exactly how we can systematically dismantle those pesky automatic negative thoughts. All minds are incredibly powerful, right? But they also play some nasty tricks on us through logical errors called cognitive biases. Take all or nothing thinking, for example, where you see everything as strictly black or white, success or total failure with zero gray area. Or overgeneralization, taking one single negative event and convincing yourself it's a permanent pattern. And then there's catastrophizing, where your brain instantly jumps to the absolute worst-case scenario. Identifying these glitches in your own thought process is the very first step in stopping the anxiety cycle.
So, how do we fight back against those biases? We use a tool called a thought diary. Check out this comparison. We start with a negative automatic thought. I'm a failure because I didn't meet my work targets. Now, instead of just accepting that as a fact, you actually play detective. You objectively examine the evidence for and against this thought. And that leads you to a revised thought. I didn't meet my target this time, but I have in the past, and my boss says I do a good job. It's such a satisfying, empowering shift, right? You're actively replacing a harsh, rigid belief with something realistic and flexible.
Okay, Section 5, Facing Fears Through Exposure. We've tackled the cognitive side, so now it is time to look at the behavioral interventions. Because let's face it, our natural human instinct is just to run away from what scares us.
When we compare ritualization or avoidance against sustained exposure, the difference is night and day. With ritualization, say a person feels contaminated and performs a ritual like excessive hand washing. Their anxiety drops, but only a little bit, and definitely not for long. The wave just inevitably repeats. But with sustained exposure, by breaking the cycle, blocking that self-imposed escape hatch, and just sitting with the discomfort, your anxiety eventually plummets even lower than before. You are literally teaching your brain that the threat is a false alarm.
The real kicker here is the timeline. If you look at avoidance, escaping the situation, your anxiety drops immediately, sure. But the next time you face that trigger, boom, it shoots right back up to nearly 100%. Now look at exposure over time. Yes, staying in the situation means your anxiety stays really high at first, but over the course of an hour or two, it steadily drops. Gradually, this extinguishes the fear response altogether. It's tough, no doubt about it, but it is the ultimate path to freedom from severe anxiety. Which brings us to our final and honestly probably our most important question. Are you ready to become your own therapist? Because what we've learned today is that breaking the anxiety cycle isn't about wishing for a magic cure. It's about actively mastering the cognitive and behavioral tools we just went through. It's about calling out your automatic thoughts, leaning into discomfort, and rewriting the actual rules your brain operates on. The tools are here, the evidence is rock solid, the next step is completely up to you.